podcast. My name is Bonsu, your host, and today we have a guest, Chuck Andrews, who is a renowned author, business coach, and also a president of one of the CEO peer groups of the famed Vistage Group. Today's topic is around the book, a lesson from the book, Necessary Endings, which is authored by Dr. Henry Cloud. I came to know about this book during one of our mastermind sessions with Chuck. He's the one that recommended it. I've read the book. I've gotten through about 80% of it. And that book is so good, I wanted it to share with other business owners and entrepreneurs. And I couldn't think of any other person to share the lessons from this book and how it will help motivate you, the business owner, to get going. So again, thanks, Chuck, for Chuck's background. He's a business broker. He's been a coach. He's been an advisor for many, many years. Today's podcast is sponsored by his website, www.ceo15.com, and also our website, www.infhorizons.com. So let's get into it. Welcome, Chuck. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
Pretty good. So I wanted to get started with this by perhaps you can share with our audience a little bit about your background and how you came to find out about this book and some of the lessons, high-level lessons that you've gotten from it, and why you were so passionate about this book and recommend it highly for other business owners and even coaches.
So in preparing for our discussion today, I look back on my career and yours, by the way, to see how many endings we've had. And in my case, after 56 years of being in the workforce, I've had a good number of endings. And it would have been nice to have had this book 56 years ago. It's true of most of the things we learn in life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But the reason I'm passionate about it more than anything else, I think, is that for the last 7 years, I've really done intensive coaching, where I'm working with people that are with me for the purpose of getting better. And yet, frequently, I have found people, CEOs, business owners, that have a difficult time pulling the trigger on people that are not performing. And as the saying goes, setting them free. And the reasons are varied, as is illustrated in the book. If you break it down into 3 kinds of people, wise, foolish, and evil, most of the challenges have to do with foolish people. Wise people tend to learn. So wise employees will take instructions, will have their own agenda, will not be dependent upon someone telling them what to do. The evil people in the world that you run into are really kind of far and few between, what has been my experience. That's not to discount the fact that there are those that are so self-centered that they can pretty closely fall into the evil category, and there's not much you can do with them. But they're also, it's been my experience, more likely to be able to be moved off or pruned, as they say in Necessary Endings. And I think looking at just the overall picture of how we deal with relationships and how we work with people to get a sense about the seasons of life is really critical. I think having that conversation that says our lives have chapters to them. What chapter are you in, and how do you vision the next chapter? I think is one of the starting points I broach with most folks. So like I said, I've been using many of the things, and I'm sure, Nano, you have as well, in assessing, is it time to move on? Have I given this everything I can give? And am I treating myself as my manager would? For the last, in my career, I've had periods of working for myself, and versus being employed by corporations. And I'm about, I guess, I'm about 50-50 on over the 56 years. In reality, though, even when I was working for someone else, I still had my own agenda. I still felt like I was in control of my life. And when I felt like that was going away, I recognized it was time for an ending. I have probably in 56 years only been fired once. And that was because I just didn't accept reality early enough. Right.
Right. That's so true.
So yeah, life does give us our lessons.
Yeah, definitely. And I know it's you mentioned that, people, but it can also happen to products, right? Because sometimes when I'm coaching other business owners and it comes time to prune some of the products, because one of the things that we do is, this thing called value building. And it has to do with, hey, not all revenues are the same. And so the foundation of getting to where you start to increase the value in your business is cutting down, finding out the set of your products and services,
Yeah.
which are either which are teachable, valuable, differentiates you in the marketplace, and also, most importantly, have repeatable customers who buy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you get into situations where, well, you go through the exercises and, well, yeah, this thing is not teachable, or this thing doesn't fit this criteria, but right now we're making a lot of money out of it. And so they kind of stall, right? Yeah. And so this is a way to ask yourself your business owner setting questions about, hey, are you delaying this because you're afraid, or you don't have the skill to do it, or just you just deferring it, and 3 or 5 years from now that same issue is going to linger around.
Yeah, you bring up some real good points. I think if you look at the eight value drivers that value builder systems kind of guide our clients into, the question of necessary endings for each of those is a really valid way to approach it. What have you been doing just because you've been doing it for so long, right, relative to both products, people, and just how you look at your business. I think, and I'm in the same category as you are in terms of having applied the value builder system. I've only been at that for a year now. And I think that I'm still seeing the same issues of holding on to ideas, holding on to people, and not recognizing the seasons of life for everything. And I'm kind of excited to move forward with clients to get them to a place where they kind of come to their own conclusions about when things need to end.
Yeah, and a lot of times, one of the things that I've come to realize is a lot of times sometimes they get really excited, like, oh my God, this thing has got me thinking.
Yeah.
And this tells me that this business line that we're in may not be the right one or not, but yeah, they just lead themselves to the right conclusion. Well, all we can do is just help them answer the right questions.
The other thing he talks about in the book is ending well. Mm-hmm. And in my day, they used to call don't burn bridges.
Right.
So when you have people that are being, let's just categorize it, say a business leader that says, I've got someone that I need to prune, I need to have them move on. How they do it is as important as anything else. Are they doing it in a way that helps that person move on to the next thing in a better state of mind? Are they doing it in a way that helps that person become a reference for their business? Or are they letting their emotions get carried away with the process? And that's also true, I think, around products and their own customers. Are they keeping customers that they should have cut loose a long time ago, or they're either not profitable? I guess you could probably put the customers, your business's customers, in those three categories too: wise customers,
Right.
foolish customers, and evil customers.
Yeah.
And examine them from that perspective. And how much time do foolish and evil customers take up, and how little profit is there in that process?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess in that same vein, we can put suppliers, right? Because there's this thing called Switzerland structure, and it talks about employees, customers, and suppliers. So maybe suppliers can also be, thrown into the mix as far as this categorization.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So this, you mentioned pruning a couple of times, and I wanted to, if you could, define a little bit about how the author uses this concept of pruning and this whole thing about rose and pruning a rose bush. So what is pruning, and how does he classify what a rose is, and this whole concept?
Yeah.
Process? Yeah.
Well, that's a good topic. I think that recognizing when I guess you could almost look at it as regarding the customer concentration issue, where you have too much of your business in one customer. And in growing flowers, you have such you have so much growth that new growth is not allowed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so true with customer concentration as well, where you're so focused on that customer that you don't put the energy into finding new customers. And so you need to prune back the energy it takes for that one customer to allow for new growth to happen. And that, I think, gets into another category that leadership needs to be aware of and really acknowledge, and that is their own courage to make those moves.
Right.
It's difficult when, and I've had clients that have gone bankrupt over having so much customer concentration that when it went south with that one customer, they had no way to stay alive. So it's critical to, I guess, first of all, it's just critical to be in touch with reality. I mean, too often you can walk into a client and say, you've got 70% of your business focused on one customer, and they just don't accept the reality that that's not a good thing. And we do it in our personal lives as well, just not just hoping. And in the book, Dr. Cloud talks about getting to the great state of hopelessness, recognizing that you really are in a hopeless situation is the first step to getting on to the next chapter. And I think his quote around, he said, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick." It's so true.
Yeah.
That's where burnout actually is the source of burnout for both you and your employees. So just dealing with reality of when situations get to that hopelessness state, it's time to leverage that.
Right. Yeah, and I imagine as I was reading the book, one of the things that kept popping up in my head is how do you tell somebody who may be naturally optimistic? They may not necessarily be ignoring reality, but it's this whole mind of a matter type of thinking.
Yeah. Blind optimism.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of that. I'm my whole life I've had a sense that I can make every bad situation become a good situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's a good quality, but it's just that when it comes to business, it can be an impediment as far as executing the necessary end is concerned. And I like this whole thing that he talks about in the book, basically what he likens to the rose bush, the rose being the standard. So a lot of times when you mentioned about the CEO or the business owner having to have the courage to execute a necessary ending, And by necessary end, then, it doesn't necessarily have to be about firing somebody or about even getting rid of a product. It could just be many different things, right? It could be,
Yeah.
divesting the business. It could be selling the business. It could be, just getting out of the day-to-day running of the business. So, but he likens this concept of the roles to the standard. So if first you need to identify what the roles is that you're going to prune, and that is an equivalent to a standard. What standard are you setting for their business? And then that then makes it easier, which is when you're having a tough conversation with an employee or a customer or a supplier about, hey, these are the standards that I have for such and such and such, and you're not meeting that expectation. So that's just the reality I want both you and I to acknowledge. You can even put in the question, would you agree? And then say, well, this is what I'm looking for. You're not meeting that standard. And so you have to let me know. Basically, you toss the decision back into them to let you know how they plan on changing or upping their game to meet that standard, right? And if not, then they can definitely advise themselves.
True. As you're mentioning that, I thought of two other books that I kind of blend into some of the things we do here. One is Positive Intelligence, and in Dr. Shamin's book, he talks about that there's a gift in every obstacle, but the gift could be three different things. That could be the gift of knowledge, it could be the gift of inspiration, or it could be the gift of power. So looking at when you're evaluating what needs to be pruned, and you're concerned about what the end result would be, try to determine what's the gift you'll get out of doing this. Is it the gift of inspiration to go get more business? It's the gift of knowledge not to do things again the same way. One of the advantages of thinking about necessary things in this light is that too often we repeat the same wrong behaviors over and over. We make the same investments in the kinds of people that we should have learned not to invest in before. And I think that too frequently our emotions get in the way of really assessing what the benefit will be to ending something. And we don't recognize that by executing that ending relationship. And you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean firing someone, but it does mean ending the way you're dealing with that person. You can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results. That's a traditional business wisdom that Dr. Cloud does a nice job of giving some new insight to.
Yeah. Now, what was the second book that you mentioned? Positive.
So the other book that I got from this is he talks about creating a sense of urgency. Yeah. And I would also offer that that's something that has to be instilled in the process to change. And the most recent book I've seen is by Katie Milkman, and it's basically a simple title called How to Change. But she's done just a marvelous job of doing research in the Fortune 500 on down to mid-sized businesses and what it takes. And one of the things she talks about is to recognize when it's time for a restart versus a fresh start. And a restart is really what we're just talking about, where you say, well, I don't necessarily have to fire them. I got to restart the process of how I'm dealing with them. Or maybe I do need to get to the point where it's just a fresh start. I got a fresh body in that spot, or a fresh customer in that place, or a fresh vendor, as you said. But I think the key is creating that urgency to make that change. And sometimes it's just the environment that you have created, you walk into every day, and it's difficult for you to make the change when you're in that same environment. It's for me, it's summed up quite frequently with business owners where I simply say, so what kind of acquisition would you make if you wanted to grow your business by another 25 to 50%? Because an acquisition changes the environment completely. But it could also be, isn't it time to upgrade your facility? Isn't it time to, just change the environment you're in to allow you to have, get comfortable with doing the pruning, doing the things you need to do that have been too much of a culture and too much of a habit over the last whatever number of years. It's a lot to throw at people.
Yeah, it is. And and that's why a lot of times they need a trusted advisor or a trusted confidant to help them with the process, somebody to bounce ideas off of.
My first value building client, I'd been coaching for 5 years prior to introducing to the value building model. And we went through it and we're quite excited about everything and looking at how to do the drivers. But we also came to the realization that in order for the next thing to happen, we have to get to an end with one thing. And so I think an advisor needs to be able to identify where you start to start making big changes. And sometimes people just need that urgency to get a good start, and then they're on down the road. But it is the end result is always impacted by what kind of a start you make on getting there.
Right. And Dr. Cloud did mention this, because I want to hop on this sense of urgency thing that you just mentioned a bit, because a lot of times when it comes to value building, because value building tends to focus on something more near to long term, like let's just say ideally 5 to 10 years out, because with the hope that at some point you're going to exit your business, whether it's about selling it, whether it's about scaling your business, whether it's about passing it down to your children, or even exiting to hire like a president to run your day-to-day operations while you go into the boardroom. But a lot of times, business owners, especially the small to medium business owners, they're so focused on the day-to-day urgencies that they feel like they don't have the time, which is kind of paradoxical, because that's even more reason if you don't have the time to figure out what are about the 8 drivers that will help free up your time.
Yeah.
What are some of the reasons that owners have given you in terms of, and I know Dr. Clark talks about playing the advisors, so it should play the video forward for the business owner so that they can see, hey, 3 years from now, what would it look like? And guess what? If you haven't done this, this is what's going to happen. And a lot of times business owners tell themselves, give themselves all kinds of reasons, basically just to kind of, reduce whatever anxiety they have about executing the necessary change or necessary end.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you have done or you've seen done that's been successful in terms of, creating the sense, helping the business owner or the CEO create a sense of urgency about why they need to focus less on the urgency? Because some of the urgent is like the Franklin Covey system. Yeah. Something may be urgent, but it may not necessarily be, if it's necessary and urgent, if it's important and urgent, you need to work on it. But, basically start to devote more of your time on the important things that are not urgent, but you need to have a sense of urgency in doing them, because 3 or 5 years from now, those are the things that are going to give you the big multiple.
Yeah. One of the best things I've ever done with my clients, and I just did it in the fourth quarter of last year in 2020, is I gave them all a 10-year planner. And usually I've got it laying around here. Where'd it go? Anyway, it's just an 8.5 by 11 book that has the next 10 years laid out in it.
Right.
And then I gave them 3 tasks. I said, the first task is to write down on the month and the day, the events in your life. So your next big birthday, whether it's 40, 50, or 60 or 70, write that date down in the 10-year planner. And your spouse, your partner's big events, your children's big events, all the things you celebrate, in life, put in that book the dates they're going to happen, and then lean back and look at it and say, okay, over the next 10 years, there's lots going to happen. A lot of things are going to happen. And then the next thing I asked them to do is go out 5 years and write a letter back to me to tell me what happened in those 5 years. What do your relationships look like? What does your business look like? How's your health? And just write a letter that says this last 5 years has been like this. And it's an exercise to get us to start visioning, for one thing,
Right.
and to recognize that over the next 10 years, things are going to change. Now, there's another wonderful book I have been recommended for years called Abundance. And Abundance is about the speed of change. I just had a speaker come to my Vistage group and talked about what technology will do to your business and how fast it's changing. And we all know it's, you look at what's on your wrist in terms of horsepower and
Right.
computing power and communications versus what was 5 years ago. And if you do a doubling of that technology every 2 to 3 years over the next 10 years, it's hard to even imagine where we'll be in 10 years.
Right.
So getting people to think beyond our current situation is the kind of, I think, the key to saying, wow, I've got a lot to get done right now. It does create a sense of urgency when you start saying, okay, if I'm 60 and I want to be out of my business in 5 years, I'm way behind on a lot of things I need to do. So whatever we can do as advisors to get people to start looking out there, I think is incumbent upon us to give them those tools.
Right. What other besides business owners and entrepreneurs and CEOs, are there any other category of people you think will benefit from reading this book?
Yes, I haven't done this yet, but I will, and that is my grandchildren. I've got 9 grandkids from 10 years old to 23. And there's some wisdom in here around how they deal with other people and relationships when it's time to give up on them. There's some wisdom, as you said, about where do I create and where do I should be focused on a sense of urgency about getting things done. And I just think there's some really good ideas to help the younger generations do that planning that makes their lives more effective and gives them a few less obstacles. Now, I think we all do need the obstacles. We all do need adversity. Without adversity, it's difficult to build a foundation of a great character.
Yeah, we also get to know how good we are. We got to test ourselves.
What's that? We don't test ourselves. Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks. I like to kind of wrap it up. And again, thanks again for your time. But are there like any 2 or 3 things you would like to leave the audience with in terms of what are some of the key immediate things that you recommend they do like right away after listening to this conversation?
I think number one is, take the 10-year vision test. Go out and just figure out what's going to happen as best you know right now in the next 10 years. And then work backwards from that. Recognize that, and I think this is critical too, recognize that endings need to be done well. There's some really great stories about people that had to either went into bankruptcy or had to shut down a big part of their business, and how well they did it had a great impact on all the people that they were working with. So give good thought to, if you have to prune, do it well, do it the right way. And then I'd say last, to do it in a way that minimizes the chance of making the same mistake going forward. Repetitive mistakes in our lives are really very normal. And to just become more in touch with reality about where we are and where we want to go. Those are my key things.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much, Chuck. Really appreciate your time and insights and wisdom you've shared with us.
Well,
this
thank you
morning.
for kind of helping me look back through this the right way and kind of blend different ideas with things I've learned over the years. So I appreciate it very much.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chuck. Talk again soon.
Bye now.